socializing session for all of you. And for the fact that I know after the morning session on folk fitness, this room is not just full of great educators sitting here, but great risk takers as well. So I am definitely looking at 100% participation here. And thanks Amana for downloading that at the last minute request. Yes, everybody has to stand up please. So we are going to dance in the Bollywood style. How many of you know Mr. Bean? But we're going to dance Bollywood in Hollywood style. So we will have a video here which is for just about a minute and we just have to copy Mr. Bean. We all have to copy, that's why I use the word risk takers here.
Good afternoon, and it's good to know that everybody has woken up. And I think that's what early childhood is all about. That's fun. The topic for discussion for us is early childhood and education. One of the thoughts which comes in my mind is that we, unfortunately in India, even today, separate early childhood from education. You know, like, if you follow the research, it says that the brain elasticity of a child, or the maximum growth, happens till the age of 8. After that, it slows down. And our early childhood is within that age bracket, but we consider early childhood and education. That's the age when they can pick up the languages the earliest, they can develop the critical thinking, risk-taking earliest, and the area which has unfortunately been neglected in India for a long, long time. Even in the K-12 segment, most of the time, I was talking to Sonal ma'am as well and Swati ma'am a little while ago, most of the principals take pre-primary for granted. It is just there, and it's happening. Whereas the light in the darkness is that now the new education policy has somehow addressed that issue, but there's a long way to go from there as well. So before we open up the panel, I will request all the panelists to share their views, what they feel about early childhood and education, and what they see about early childhood and education in 2030. So we'll start with Sonal ma'am.
First of all, if you talk about 2030, well, I'm a person, I don't even know what I'm going to do tomorrow. I don't know my schedule at all. So talking about 2030, and that too early childhood and education, is something we are doing it really high on. What we have to focus more is that, can we just see what these children are today in 2019? Just raise your hands and tell me how many of us know these preschoolers, say 2.5 and 3.5-year-olds, who go to the early childhood settings. How many of us know who they are actually? How many of us know that? Who they are actually? We know that they're coming to our settings and we have to teach them A, B, C's, numbers, etc., etc. More than that, we really don't even spend kind of enough time understanding who they are. To me, if I have to tell you, they are the ones who are today born with, those excellent softwares installed in their brains. They don't need us. What is needed is, when they enter in our settings and premises, we need to have enough time and patience to observe who they are, what are their capabilities, and how is that you and me as early childhood education stakeholders need to help them leverage those capabilities, what they already have with them. So that's the first role we need to first work on, rather thinking on the 2030 position of early childhood education. And for this, I think I would advocate for this. There has to be a comprehensive policy in early childhood education, which is still not there. There are certain drafts which have come, but it's not formalized. So that's a mandatory step which has to be taken right away today. I really second the thought that Lieutenant General Kulkarni mentioned, that 2030 has already arrived. We don't have to wait for it to come. These children are already capable and they're living their life in today's era. And they're already prepared for the future. It's just they have to live that moment today. So one, I believe that comprehensive policy today is the most important. Two, there has to be a beautiful integration, It's like early childhood and education. Most of us mistake here, unfortunately. We take it only as early childhood education. To me, early childhood is one separate domain where care, development, neurology, behaviors, life skills, happiness. There's so many things that kind of covered under early childhood, what early childhood is all about. In fact, I'm also a parent of 2 kids. And I've realized we don't even enjoy our own children's childhood years. We're so busy preparing them for the future. So one is this, and the other is education then. So there has to be an integration in maybe the curriculums or whatever the system we are bringing out for early childhood education, that it should take care of all the 3 domains of care, development and learning in a very close-knit format. And then I believe awareness. Awareness today, which is most important, is we need to be aware of what is the real need of early childhood right now. Do they really need to come to us just to learn about numbers, letters, marks, academics? And of course, mistakenly, this thing is taken as a preparation for the primary schools. Most of the preschool settings and even the pre-primary sections in the formal schools, they take early childhood as a preparative step towards primary education, which is again a big flaw that I see in the system. To me, 2030 is nothing. It's all about today. What are we supposed to do now? How we can take the things forward and design it so beautifully that by default, on an autopilot mode, 2030 is going to be a beautiful life for them.
So what I gather from your explanation is that one thing which is very important as of today is a proper policy formation.
Absolutely.
For the early years in education sector.
For the uniformity.
Exactly.
There is no policy. Everybody is going their own way.
Right.
There are different things taught in the early childhood settings in our country. In fact, the focus is still there on the cursive writing, I really get shocked.
Completely changed. They've started looking at the schools and the stakeholders in the schools or the teachers as the service providers. So the requirements and the expectations of the parents are completely different rather than collaboration. So where do you see that in terms of early childhood?
If you talk about awareness, then I won't say the parents who are, there are 2 kinds of awareness. One, that I'm an aware parent and I keep telling the teachers, I'll give you the live examples, what I see in my everyday life at my preschool settings. मैम इसने ना खाना नहीं खाया, इसको खाना खिला देना प्लीज. Early morning 8:30 calls, okay, 4-5 calls every day, and they say I'm a very aware parent and I take care of the nutrition of my child so nicely. Then there is another child who is coming near the school gate and you're there standing to greet these lovely kids in the morning and you say good morning to them because that's how you are. You are expressing your gratitude towards the parents and the children who have come to your premises, and you would see one mother coming from, say good morning. Ma'am is saying good morning, but say good morning. You know, this different definition of awareness. One is that I'm such an aware parent, where I want my child to be the best in whatever way it is possible. Another awareness is about the real child, who the child is. Now that, what I call, is important to be addressed. That is what is actual awareness. Where as a parent, you know that the child has taken birth, and we know that children learn, they start learning at birth. This has to be very much clear with each one of us as educators and parents, that children, they need not have the adults around to push them to learn something. They already have those capabilities in them. Number two, the children need time to think and process. Even the machines take time to, you put the input, you give the input, there is a processing time, and then you get the output. So we as parents, sometimes we don't even give that much time to the children to have their own thought process on the go. By the time you throw a question on them and you want the answer out of them. So that autonomy, that freedom to the children have to be given so that they can be themselves, they can think all by themselves, and then they can do the stuff at their own dispersal. You are into the classroom settings and early childhood settings and you would see teachers teaching different lessons to them. And I have seen the organizations, I don't want to name, they plan the lesson plans. Now the lesson plan says 2 minutes for the particular activity, 5 minutes for the on-hands activity, 10 minutes for the free play and discussions related to a particular thing. I strongly am against this. That's not the way to go forward. That's not the awareness. The thing is, if a child is exposed to a particular subject, the child should be given enough time and opportunity to use his and her senses at their own will. And that's what is going to bring the real outcomes out of the child. So there is a different definition to me for awareness, which we are mistaken that we call ourselves as aware parents. I'm sorry, we are not. There is a long way to go. We need to aware ourselves. We need to read about who the children are, what their psychology is, what are the ways they learn. And I think schools have to play a great role in this. Being myself a school promoter, I always keep holding the sessions for the parents. Almost, I was just sharing with Dr. Swati that every Saturday is where I spend my Saturdays with the parents. 5 to 6 families, I love to meet them. I call them in my office and we talk about how they are doing and how the children are doing and what are the ways they can adapt at home in their families together to kind of let the child be himself. So this is the way to go forward.
All right. My next question is to Ms. Sani. I don't know if it was planned by Ravi, but I'm the only... Yeah. And if you look around, in India especially, we still have the mindset that the ladies are the best suited for early ed, which is not the case in the West. There they look at the person on many levels, psychologically, professionally, emotionally, and even people from the other gender can also be the early ed educators. So do you see that happening by 2030, or do you feel that no, it's best suited for ladies to be the early ed educators?
I wouldn't go and focus more on the gender of a female educator or a male educator. I think anybody who has that patience to listen to children and build on their conversations and interactions, because that leads to great learning, can be a fantastic early years educator. I can see that, I agree with you, it's happening more in the Western world. I see that as a growing trend in the international schools, where you see early years coordinators also who are male. And initially, like about 8 years back, I met someone at a IB regional conference, and he was fabulous. And I just couldn't, I kept looking at him and I said, what brought you to early childhood? Because I don't see men in this, working with children of this age group. He says, what it has to do with being a man or a woman. It's all about that passion to work with that age group. It's to do with understanding that age group. And like I said, interaction is the key. So if one can link to that and one can do that, I think it makes you a fabulous early years educator.
So my request to all fellow educators areas or the leaders, educational leaders, is whenever you have the vacancy for a teacher of early education, maybe we can start by just advertising early educators required, rather than putting a gender, only ladies or females are required. Ms. Nagpal, another important aspect which I have seen in my 20 years of educational career is that the schools tend to spend least on the professional development of the early ed. Until a few years back, I was not aware that there are some formal trainings which are happening, like CBSE, ICSE, IB, IG. They all do trainings for very aggressively on the middle school and the higher school. Unless Early Childhood Association started, reaching out to different organizations and do the training. So do you see that changing? And what are the ways and means which you can suggest to this audience to make that paradigm shift, that a good amount of share of the professional development of the teachers has to go on the early ed educators as well?
Firstly, I'm very glad you brought that point, because that point has been running in my mind, and that is very, very, very crucial. Like most of us know that this segment is the least talked about segment, the early years. Having professional trained teachers or constant training for teachers or helping them grow more professionally is a must, because the field keeps updating every now and then. There is so much research going on in the Western countries and in India about how the thought process of children keep changing or remain the same, but as adults we are not able to sink ourselves into that thought process, like how Ms. Anisha mentioned, that interaction is the key. And when we start developing our teachers professionally, we guide them how to interact with them in the most optimal way. That is very crucial over here, because like I said, for example, if the child has just scribbled, usually teachers don't ask the child, what have you drawn? But this is the key role, is the time when we need to start interacting. What have you drawn? It looks beautiful. Why have you chosen certain colors? We need to start focusing on these things. So as educators, it is a must that we keep upgrading ourselves. It's a must that we keep gaining more and more knowledge about what are the updated things in the field. And by 2030 is what I see that most educators would have upgraded themselves into this field and also tapped on other aspects that are required for 2030.
Thank you, ma'am. Sonal ma'am, another important point which is unique about our country is, like if you look at Japan, France, Germany, Russia, you look at England, Canada, America, a child learns in the language they are born with. But in India, by the time the child reaches in the educational sector, he starts learning in the third language, which means that they are already put behind the rest of the world. Like we gave the decimal of pi, we gave a decimal, our country gave the pi, zero concept, and that all happened at a time when those great people were learning in the language they were born with. There are schools who must be working towards it, who are equipped, but we also know that there are many schools who are not. So what are your points or views as to how can a school bridge the gap in these early years for that educational difference of a third language, so that our children do not suffer with the learning gap? Most of us educators don't realize that the moment the pre-primary years are neglected, the learning gap starts increasing amongst the children, and we feel he's a tougher, he doesn't study, he doesn't do this. We don't realize that even at this age today, if you make me sit in a Tamil class, I'll be completely zero. So what are your views that how that gap can be bridged? Because that is the age when you get children who may not necessarily be from English-speaking families. And there are most of these CBSE, ICSE and other curriculums which follow English as a medium of instruction.
That's why when I began, I said there has to be a very comprehensive policy where it's very well laid down that children at the preschool level, where all the early, because there is a mismatch, everyone is the owner of their own settings. They are teaching the children into multiple different ways. That's why there is a problem when the children kind of from the early childhood settings go to the primary schools. The expectations of the primary schools are very standardized. Now, a child who is entering into, say, grade KG and grade 1, they are supposed to undergo a test, a small examination if they are going to apply for that particular school. And they're expected to, reach to those standards of the people who are there around, who are kind of there as examiners to these children. And you're right, very rightly you said that the children kind of feel lost at that point in time. So there has to be a standardization, for sure, and I second Dr. Swati Popat words to really work towards the Ministry for Early Childhood Education. That's the way to go, because our country doesn't have any ministry, there are no norms laid down, so everybody is doing things in their own ways, and ultimately the children are the sufferers. So one, this is very much important, and I already said that awareness. There is no bridging of these gaps, The early childhood settings are hardly meeting the primary school people. And the primary school people are hardly inviting the early childhood settings to enter into their schools. Because even they are afraid that the pre-primary sections could be taken over by them. So, these gaps have to be well linked together, where then we walk together on it. And then we understand what are the needs of a primary school. And the primary school also in some way try to understand what are our limitations. Being into the early childhood settings, there are certain limitations we work with. I cannot help out. I cannot prepare a 2.5-year-old or a 3-year-old child to kind of go and write an exam. Look at the age criteria of our country. 3 years on 31st March, a child has to enter grade nursery, which is again not acceptable. But it's happening because we don't have any ministry, there are no policies in place, we have to follow certain things. So, all in all, the whole impact is on the children, their psychology, and on the top of that, the parents who are unaware, they are pressurizing. The teachers, the schools, the children, and the schools in return are pressurizing the parents, children and teachers, and everything is, airtight. So the time has come to open up.
Well, thank you so much. With that, we open the floor for any questions if anybody has for any of the panelists. If we could take the questions? After what? Offline? No, we would like to take online maybe a couple of questions at least. Anyone has any questions? Don't get intimidated by Ravi. He's covered by Swati Popat ma'am, so he dare not cut short this early childhood session.
For your information, he sits on my advisory board.
No questions? Oh wow, that's even better, Ravi. Oh, there's one question, one gentleman. See, sometimes some very important questions also can come up. Sir, please ask, whom do you want to ask question, or is it open to all?
Open to all. My question is like, how much percentage of educators do we have to cater to this early childhood education? And like ma'am was telling about ORS preparation, that they go and have awareness campaigns to train those parents how to do the ORS thing. And for every child, I feel there is a lot of time which has to be given for them to be observed and done all those things. So is it really possible for educators to do that role, having a small amount of people and having such a great population in our country? So can't the parents take over this role? And the children, they come to school maybe after 6 years of their age, they come to school, and 3 to 6 they are at home, and the parents are equipped that they are able to focus on their children to do this job, because it requires a lot of time to be concentrated on each child. Is it really possible by us as educators? That is my question and doubt.
I think it's possible if you pay the teachers well. It's very much possible. Why not? Number two, when you say parents can do that, then that's also another possibility, because if you go through and see, there are lots and lots of alternative education organizations coming up. There are a lot of children getting homeschooled by their parents. Possibilities are there. But again, I would say if you're homeschooling a child, you need to first educate yourself to be able to give that stimulus to the child at home. Because homeschooling and teaching a child at home is not limited to just teaching at home. You have to play a role of more than an educator. You cannot just be at home in 4 walls and teach a child, you know. At home, again, it's more like how much time can you then spend, take your child outside into the woods, into the grass, in the forest, to the different places. If you are able to take out that time, then it's most amazing thing to do, and I can open it to all you. You must go to Wikipedias and Google. There are wonderful families who have done fabulous work homeschooling their children. It is possible. And then, as I said, good money into the early childhood education will attract a lot of wonderful teachers, I assure you, and that's the challenge and the limitation, that teachers are not well paid. And I have thousands of evidences of it. You pay them, you get more teachers.
Just adding to her point, if policies are in place, if there is a ministry for education and having a early childhood education and care section in the ministry, I think most of our problems would be sorted there. So everything, whatever she's saying, would come under the same thing. And just adding on to your point, there are a lot of parents in the Western countries who do a lot of homeschooling. Homeschooling in naturalistic environment is also very important, because you can't do it in 4 walls. Then the children have to be exposed to nature, because ultimately we are living in the nature. We've come from the nature. So exposing children to nature is very, very, very important.
Arohi Life Education, Bangalore, Sudbury Valley, USA, CFL, again Bangalore. These are few organizations. If you go through, you'll be amazed by the kind of work which is happening. CFL is again Krishnamurthy for philosophy. You'll see the communities running these schools fantastically.
Ms. Sunny, do you want to add anything before we close?
Yeah, sorry, just the last bit. I slightly differ and have a little different opinion here. Not that I'm against formulating policies or something. What happens is when you have very tight policies, people start following it blindly. It's just, implementing something which is in black and white. Also, the kind of families that we started living in, nuclear families. I don't see many opportunities for parents giving that homeschooling environment. So hence the need for more and more places where early childhood is taken care of and education is taken care of in a very unstructured manner is, I think, what is the need of the future.
Well, thank you so much. I thank all the ladies on the panel. I think there are quite a few takeaways from here. One is definitely that we don't have a clear-cut policy on early childhood which needs to be implemented ASAP. And we need to take it as a separate sect of the education system, which is equally important. And also need to look at the possibility of raising voice wherever we can, so that the salary disparity amongst the pre-primary teachers and the teachers who are teaching in university is completely taken care of. And I would just like to add one thing here which I observed personally on my rounds. Once I was taking a round to school and I walked into class 1, and there the teacher wasn't there, so I thought maybe I could engage the students in a very healthy and a progressive way. So I started talking to them, engage with them, and you won't believe, ladies and gentlemen. Within 10 minutes, I wish I had an AK-47 and I would have just killed all of them. What I'm trying to tell you here is the patience which the teachers and the educators in the early years need, we don't realize it. The stress which they already have or they bring from home, they can't bring it in the classroom. They are the ones who need to be paid really, really well. So with that, we rest our panel. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mr. Zantlani. Thank you so much.